It was a quiet Sunday afternoon at Adelaide Cottage, but on the rug by the sunlit bay window, an abandoned wooden toy train lay completely forgotten. Just minutes before, a 6-year-old Prince Louis had been pushing that train across the floor, his laughter echoing down the hallways in a scene of pure, normal childhood bliss. But in a single, sudden moment, a nanny stepped into the room, quietly gathered up his things, and gently guided Louis and his 10-year-old sister, Princess Charlotte, toward the heavy oak doors of the private sitting room. When those doors swung shut, the protective bubble around these royal children shattered forever. This was not a routine family chat. Inside that room, Princess Catherine sat her 2 youngest children down on the sofa directly beside her. Standing near the mantelpiece, his face etched with intense emotional strain, was Prince William. There were no court officials present, no private secretaries taking notes in the corner, no PR advisors hovering in the shadows. The meeting was deliberately unlisted on any official palace log. William and Kate had drawn a firm, unbreakable line. This truth belonged strictly to their family, not to the institution, not to the press, and not to the public. Children raised in the royal family are trained almost from birth to read the energy of a room. 10-year-old Charlotte looked at her mother not with confusion, but with immediate, heartbreaking concern she had already been picking up on the quiet shifts and heavy silences around the house. For little Louis, the complex medical terms may have been far beyond his young comprehension, but he instantly felt the weight in his parents' voices. The carefree, vibrant energy that usually defines the young prince, the boy known for his joyful antics on palace balconies, vanished in a single afternoon. Palace insiders reveal that inside the home, Louis's demeanor shifted noticeably following that conversation. He grew quieter, stayed closer to his mother's side, and began seeking constant physical reassurance, the natural reaction of a child trying to process a reality he cannot fully articulate. What William and Catherine executed that Sunday was a radical, revolutionary departure from centuries of royal protocol. Historically, when health crises struck the monarchy, royal children were kept at a cold, formal distance. They were managed by nannies, shielded behind vague reassurances, and left in the dark while adults made calculated decisions behind closed doors. William and Catherine completely rejected that ancient framework. They chose total transparency over institutional distance, anchoring Charlotte and Louis with the truth before the global media machine could spin its own rumors. They understood a fundamental rule of parenting. A controlled truth in a safe space is infinitely better than external chaos. The immediate aftermath inside Adelaide Cottage was agonizingly tense. Staff members who had served the family for years began walking on eggshells. The usual light-hearted banter between domestic staff and the royal protection team completely ceased, replaced by a quiet, laser-focused professionalism. Within minutes of that sitting room door opening, security protocols were systematically overhauled. Encrypted radio channels were updated, travel routes were altered, and personal protection officers immediately adjusted the heavy blinds on the family vehicles to block long-range camera lenses. Security teams knew the children would be emotional, and they were fiercely determined that no paparazzi photographer would ever capture that vulnerability from a mile away. The changes quickly bled into the children's daily lives outside the cottage walls. Their daily routine at Lambrook School, once a rare pocket of normalcy, was completely restructured. Instead of pulling up to the standard drop-off point near the playing fields alongside other families, the green royal SUV was redirected to a restricted service lane hidden behind the administrative building. Before the doors were even unlocked, a senior security officer scanned the perimeter. Charlotte and Louis stepped out onto private tarmac, entering the school through a back route that kept them entirely isolated from the main flow of students. Palace Protection Command convened an urgent, high-level briefing with Lambrook's board of directors to construct what was described as a total media wall around the children. But building a physical perimeter around a school cannot stop the digital noise of the modern world. You can secure a schoolyard, but you cannot control what other students see on their phones at home or what parents discuss over dinner. Despite a dedicated palace digital monitoring team scanning global platforms around the clock, the outside world eventually breached the perimeter. A crumpled printout of an unverified online article was discovered in a recycling bin near the sports pavilion, confiscated by an alert teacher after older students were seen passing it around. Then came a heartbreaking incident in art class. Louis was sitting at a corner table, quietly working on a watercolor painting of the Berkshire woods. At the adjacent desk, two older pupils began whispering and glancing in his direction. Though the young prince never looked up, his movements noticeably slowed, his paintbrush hovering motionless over the water jar. He didn't say a word, but the subtle weight of knowing he was being talked about settled heavily upon him. The school responded decisively, implementing a blanket ban on personal digital devices during school hours, framing it as a general wellness initiative so as not to single out the royal children. Morning assemblies were restructured to focus on digital literacy, empathy, and the vital importance of respecting private lives. At home, Prince William stepped up to manage the emotional fallout. On quiet evenings, he sat with Princess Charlotte, giving her a safe space to ask tough questions about things she had overheard. Charlotte's remarkable poise is a double-edged sword. Her sharp awareness means she absorbs far more adult tension than her younger brother. William's strategy was to anchor her firmly in the physical facts of her mother's recovery, shielding her mind from the sensationalized narratives circulating online. When Louis naively asked during a weekend drive why unfamiliar people were trying to peer over the hedges of their garden, William offered a gentle, protective reframe. People care deeply about your mother, Louis, and they just want to see how she's doing. As the weeks progressed, Princess Catherine's protective instincts flared with ferocious intensity. In a dramatic moment at Anmer Hall in Norfolk, Catherine stood by a window watching a security vehicle sweep the boundary line, holding the provisional Summer State Diary from the Lord Chamberlain's office. The document listed major national events, carriage processions, military flypasts, and iconic balcony appearances. Taking a blue pen, Catherine deliberately crossed her younger children's names completely off the official attendance roster. Her act of blue ink defiance triggered an immediate crisis inside the palace press office. Official media credentials had already been issued to international broadcasters expecting to film the young royals. Frantic palace officials worked behind closed doors to reframe the sudden withdrawal as routine scheduling priorities. Senior PR consultants convened a closed-door meeting at Buckingham Palace, arguing that completely removing the children from public view would fuel dangerous internet speculation. They proposed a compromise: a single, highly controlled family photograph in the gardens to satisfy public demand. Catherine rejected the proposal instantly. Her position was absolute. Her children's private lives and emotional well-being would never be used as public currency to appease the digital news cycle. Prince William stood shoulder to shoulder with his wife, making it crystal clear to senior courtiers that his children's emotional security would always take precedence over the demands of the institution. It was a profound philosophical clash between the old guard, who believed visibility was the monarchy's primary source of strength, and the new household, who recognized that the long-term survival of the crown depends entirely on the psychological health of the children who will one day inherit it. To support this fierce protective stance, massive logistical operations were put into motion. The family's traditional helicopter flights between residences, easily tracked by flight enthusiasts and press photographers, were largely abandoned. Instead, the family moved in heavily armored, unmarked security convoys equipped with electronic countermeasures to jam unauthorized tracking signals, traveling across the country without leaving a digital footprint. At Anmer Hall, physical defenses were fortified using the family's private funds to keep the details out of public parliamentary reports. High-timber acoustic fencing was constructed along public footpaths, and dense, mature laurel bushes were planted along the tree line to completely block views from elevated camera positions outside the property. In the surrounding Norfolk village of Great Birch, local shopkeepers and farmers formed an unwritten pact of loyalty. Whenever a stranger with a long-lens camera was spotted loitering near the local bakery, the village network alerted estate security within minutes. This grassroots community protection gave Catherine the rare freedom to take her children on peaceful morning walks through private woodlands without the constant fear of intrusion. Out of this shared adversity, an unbreakable bond forged between Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. The typical sibling rivalries of childhood vanished, replaced by an intense, instinctive solidarity. 10-year-old Charlotte stepped into the role of a quiet guardian, constantly monitoring her younger brother's moods, adjusting his school tie, and gently stepping in to distract him whenever external pressures grew too heavy. Louis, in turn, anchored his vibrant personality in her steady, reassuring presence. Seeing this shift, palace advisors began quietly rewriting future long-term planning documents, framing the next generation not as isolated individuals bound by separate royal duties, but as an inseparable, supportive unit capable of standing together against the crushing weight of the institution. At Windsor Castle, work was quietly accelerated to restore a historic children's library adjacent to the family's private apartments. Fitted with traditional oak desks and classic literature, the room provided a secure, quiet sanctuary where Charlotte and Louis could complete their schoolwork close to their parents during intensive treatment periods, eliminating the need for exhausting travel between estates. On weekends at Anmer Hall, stripped of palace formality, the family found their ultimate reset. Prince William led the children on long walks through the private forest, teaching Louis how to identify bird migrations, while Charlotte collected leaves for her nature journal. In an old outbuilding on the property, William built Louis a small woodworking workshop, where the young prince could focus his energy on building wooden projects with real tools under supervision. When you step back and look at the storm that engulfed this family, the transformation is extraordinary. The heartbreaking announcement at Adelaide Cottage, the schoolyard intrusions, the digital threats, and the fierce battles with palace courtiers could have fractured their domestic world. Instead, it hardened their internal armor and brought them closer than ever before. That abandoned wooden toy train on the rug at Adelaide Cottage captured the exact moment a carefree childhood changed forever. But while their world shifted, it did not break. Charlotte and Louis are growing up with an absolute, revolutionary certainty that is rare in any family and practically unheard of in a royal one. The absolute knowledge that they are fiercely loved, that their emotional well-being comes first, and that no matter how uncertain the world outside the gates may be, they will always have each other.